Is your practice tired of wrestling with insurance denials, deciphering EOBs, and watching your revenue slip through the cracks? You are not alone. Welcome to The Claim Game, the podcast designed to cut through the confusion and provide you with the best practices for revenue cycle management success. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and we've been with people just like you in the trenches. Each week, we'll break down complex billing processes, share real-world solutions from practices like yours, and ask questions of the game makers and changers of healthcare so you can take control of your revenue. Let's turn those claim denials into deposits and help you return to focusing on patient care. It's time to win the claim game.
Welcome back to The Claim Game, everyone. As a reminder, every so often we like to take a strategic pause to get a behind-the-scenes look at the very game we're playing in healthcare by talking to the game designers, the game architects, or the game changers, right? We're going to consult these folks to get invaluable insights into the design and development of the healthcare landscape. By interviewing the architects of this complex system, the payers, regulators, key players in the industry, we can gain a deeper understanding of the rules and the nuances of the game of healthcare, the game of revenue cycle management. This knowledge will give you a significant advantage, allowing you to navigate the terrain with greater clarity and to make better, high quality, more informed strategic decisions. So get ready to learn directly from the game makers and enhance your understanding of the claim game. Today's game maker is Uriah Guilford. He's a good friend of mine. He's a licensed therapist and group practice owner. He's also the author of the Productive Practice book, and he is the head nerd at Productive Therapist, a virtual assistant company that serves providers in private practice. He's a technology nerd, a minimalist travel packer, and a rock drummer. Please welcome Uriah Guilford. Hey, Uriah, welcome to The Claim Game.
Thanks, Jeremy. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So you've built a really fascinating career. You and I have talked a lot. You're the head nerd at Productive Therapist. What was the moment you realized how much friction and inefficiency existed in the typical patient registration process?
I think it was early on. I started my practice in 2008, and I was actually a part of sort of a group of therapists that operated under a name, but we were all solo practitioners. And so we took turns handling intake week by week. And I remember when it was my turn to take over the main line, we called it, the intake line. And I saw that there were several calls there that had not been listened to or responded to in maybe 5-6 days. And I remember just thinking, that is so unfortunate, because all these people calling this group, were in some sort of crisis, even if it was mild to moderate crisis, and to get no callback, I just thought that was something that should never happen. So of course I, called these folks back, and then I determined that when it's my week, I'm going to be on top of things because people deserve to get a callback, right? So when I left that group and it was fully on my own, from that moment on, it was just a priority to me to get back to people as quickly as possible. And then later on in 2015, I started a group practice, so it became even more important. And the volume of calls coming in became higher. And for as long as I've been a practicing therapist, and probably before that, there's been this challenge of therapists not being able to return calls and emails to potential clients for way too long. So the bar is set pretty low. But I think that's where it started, way back in maybe 2008, 2009.
That's wild. Why is it not a priority, you think, in a lot of, and this is not just therapy practices, this is like private practice nationwide? Because I think we would all agree that when you call a practice, or even just expand that, right? You call a contractor, right? And if they pick up the phone and get you on the schedule, you're way more likely to use them now and in the future, maybe. Depends on how quality their service is, I suppose. But why do you think that priority starts to drip down the list?
That's a good question. It's not because therapists don't care, because every single one of us care about what we do and we care about the service that we offer. I think that it's just that a lot of therapists in private practice are very busy. Number one, they're busy seeing clients, so they don't have the time to respond quickly. And then number two, they don't have good systems set up, whether it's using technology or artificial intelligence or any number of other things to actually provide a quick response when they're not available. So I think those are two of the main things. I tell this story in one of my courses about a plumbing emergency that I had one day. And it was actually on a holiday, which was terrible, but I was hanging something above the toilet in my bathroom and I put a screw right through the water pipe. And so, water starts leaking out of my drywall. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a proper emergency. So I ended up cutting open the wall and seeing what I had done. There was a pipe right there. I put a screw through it, And so I immediately, pretty quickly got on my phone and started calling local plumbers. It's a holiday, right? So left a message, maybe I think I filled out an online form or something like that. And then I called one guy and he answered the phone and then he talked to me for a few minutes. And then he came to my house the same day, fixed my problem. And I was happy to pay him that money. Obviously, not everybody, not every owner of a business can answer the phone live all the time, but just the level of service, I've always felt like that's the highest level of service, whether it's a solo practice or a group practice. If you can have somebody responded to within 30 to 60 seconds, like that's amazing.
It's huge.
That's like the highest level of customer service.
It's huge. I have a friend who's a real estate developer here in Detroit. And he always says that if contractors wanted to dominate the market here, they have to manage two things, the phone and the calendar. If you can dominate those two things, you can basically control the flow of business in, right? Given your marketing is okay and stuff. I want to back up because I think there's a difference of opinion between you and I. So I'd like to explore this in live color here. When you say patient registration, or when you think about patient registration or intake, what does that process look like? Can you map that out for me?
I feel like this is a setup because you haven't told me what we disagree on.
Yeah, that's right. It is a setup.
Perfect. Okay. So patient registration / intake process. I mean, to me, it's everything that happens from first contact to first session.
Okay.
Right? So that initial response to the inquiry, however that inquiry comes in, and then there's the sort of sales process, if you will. We don't like to use that word, but there's that initial consultation call or maybe back and forth communication through text or email. And then there's the scheduling of the first appointment, send the forms, complete the forms, and then actually complete the first appointment. So it's kind of everything from, first contact to first session.
No, that makes sense. That actually is pretty close to how we see patient intake. We always think that when the patient checks out, and what happens after checkout is like when that gets completed. Because then ideally you have everything you need for like a claim, right? In the billing world, it's all about how do you get the right info for a claim. But it does make sense that like ideally you have all that information by the intake, right? So that makes sense.
And when you say checkout, you mean end the session, end the first session, right?
End the session, and then they get on the schedule for the next one. Is like when your intake process is like finished. But a lot of practice owners are still relying on manual processes or outdated systems. What do you see in productive therapists as the real cost of those inefficiencies, not just in terms of time, like lost revenue, patient satisfaction, or staff burnout? How do you define the real cost of those inefficiencies?
Yeah, there's a lot of downsides to not having good systems or good people to support your practice. I'm just going back in my mind to the early days of my private practice. And I was always so thrilled when a new client would come in and they would compliment me on my use of technology.
Yeah,
because like I was kind of an early adopter of online scheduling. Now it's like obviously very common, but I used some online scheduling tools that allowed people to schedule that first consultation with me to even talk about what they were going through and what they needed. And then I used EHRs before they were everywhere and widespread. And people were just so impressed with my use of technology. So that's why I'm the head nerd, because I love that stuff. Yeah, but I think like the cost, there's multiple costs, right? So creating less than ideal or maybe a negative client experience is a huge one, because everything that you do for your practice is marketing. Even the way you handle collecting insurance information, checking benefits, and handling that whole insurance process, it's all marketing in the sense that if you give somebody an outstanding experience, they're going to tell somebody, they're going to tell their friends, they're going to maybe write a review. So everything you do is marketing. Even if that person doesn't become a client, but you just help them and give them good referrals, that is beneficial to your business. So creating a negative or a less than stellar client experience. And then the other big one for me is burning out the practice owner or their team, right? So if there's not a good system, or there's just not enough support, then someone's going to get burnt out, and they're going to either just suffer in silence, or they're going to quit or leave. So those are some big costs.
Have you seen those in a lot of the practices you've worked with? Just like people burning out and leaving, and all because of the intake process?
I would say yes, absolutely. And especially the larger practices, right? Because they've got maybe multiple intake coordinators, multiple folks doing billing. And if you don't orchestrate and like arrange those operational systems well, like it just becomes, it becomes very inefficient. People get frustrated. People don't know what they're doing or who's doing what, or it just gets very complicated. So if that's not handled well, and there's just a lot of turnover in the intake coordinator position, while that is, in my mind, one of the most important roles in the business. Probably right up there with their insurance biller, honestly, right?
Well, yeah,
The
it's
lifeblood.
intake for sure, right? Because that's the opening act to somebody's experience with your practice. And that's why I think when practices launch or a new owner takes over, it's a very high priority. There's a lot of care and concern about that. And then as a practice owner develops or things get busier, they have to worry about taxes and AI and all this stuff. I think it becomes less of a priority. And I think it can quietly become a killer of a practice, right? And then they go, why do I have billing issues? And then we oftentimes, when we do an audit, we look at intake, and you find out when you peel the onion back that what's going on up front is not what you hoped or set up initially. So then you have to renovate that process, right? So that's what we've seen a lot of. But so you're a big early adopter, which I've seen even now, right? Like you love AI tools and new companies and what's going on. But you're also a big advocate for leveraging support, right? So how can having a virtual assistant transform this process to be what it ought to be?
Absolutely. So for every solopreneur, whether you're a therapist or any other industry, right? You start out doing all of the things and wearing all of the hats. So you are the marketing department, you are networking and PR, you are accounting, and you're the person that cleans the carpet if there's a carpet, right? So you do all the things, and that's just natural. It's normal, especially as therapists. In our training, we don't get prepared to be business people, and we don't get prepared to be owners of a multi-employee sort of operation. So that is just kind of like what we default to. And so a lot of therapists struggle, and they delegate too late, and they wait too long to get help. So that's part of the reason why I started. I think actually the main reason why I started Productive Therapist is because I needed to solve my own problem. I'm sure I've told you this story, but I was here in this building where I'm at right now with multiple therapists and handling all the things, wearing all the hats, still seeing about 20 to 23 clients a week and trying to handle the intake role. Yeah, it was insane. Definitely.
I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
And the work that we do, the work that I always have done, is family therapy with adolescents, right? So we're talking 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Sometimes I would leave at like 10 o'clock after everything is wrapped up. It was
10 o'clock at night.
At night, PM.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're rolling into Taco Bell to get a burrito as dinner on your way home, right? Or something.
Exactly. It was way too much. So I needed to solve this problem, and I ended up hiring a friend. And then as I sort of trained him and got him going in this role, two surprising things happened. One, I thought there's no way that he could have better numbers than me or just do a better job client care at, handling that intake role. Turns out his numbers were actually better. He was bringing more clients in and converting more clients than I was. So I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then the second thing that I had sort of an aha moment as I was talking to my friends and colleagues, I realized that other people needed the same thing. So I had a really good friend, we're still friends, in San Francisco with an awesome practice, and he needed the same solution. So I was like, well, why couldn't my employee also help my friends? So that's kind of how that started. And then I sort of fell in love with, the idea of having virtual assistant and the idea of having that support. I should say that prior to hiring my first employee in my business, I actually worked with a virtual assistant for 5 years. So I had already been sold on that idea for quite a while. And I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. I was telling my friends, hey, I have a virtual assistant. And they're like, what is that? I was like, oh, let me tell you. It's so cool. Yeah. So that's kind of how Productive Therapist started. And ever since then, I've seen the compounding power of delegating and building an amazing team so that you can actually accomplish big goals and just help a lot more people.
Well, that's the key, right? Is maximizing your impact, right? And we see this all the time. I don't know if you've seen this too, but you've definitely seen this. A practice owner gets their time back because they outsource something. They get over being afraid of the cost of that thing. They do it, and then they go, I'm never, ever going back. And then their practice grows at like twice the rate it would have, right? Or more,
Oh, yeah.
which makes complete sense when you live it. I think before you make that jump, it doesn't make a lot of sense, or it can feel kind of scary. Can you share any like real world examples of how practice you've worked with that's like completely transformed its processes using a virtual assistant?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is a practice in Washington State. And it was a rather large, not large, actually about 15 clinicians or so. And this practice owner had 2 admins working about 50 hours a week. And they had a pretty good influx of inquiries, and they took a number of different insurances, but it just wasn't working. The flow, and the cooperation between those 2 people wasn't really going well. And the owner was spending a lot of money on admin. And so she reached out to us, and my associate got on the phone with her and said, I think we could help you with a lot less hours and a lot less money. So we actually were able to give her one of our sort of veteran virtual assistants who stepped in and with about 20 to 30 hours a month was able to handle all those inquiries, streamline the process, and just like kind of revolutionize their intake process. So I think that's an example that comes to mind. And she was just so thrilled, like she was getting better care for her incoming potential clients and paying less for the service. And it was just all around a win-win.
Oh, that's great. No, thanks for sharing that. All right, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that we're living in an age of AI, right? And it seems like there's this gold rush of AI can fix everything, which could be a total exaggeration. It could not be, right? Who knows? How is AI beginning to transform or impact, or how do you project it transforming or impacting this process, intake, patient registration?
Yeah, my goodness, AI is seeping into absolutely everything in our lives. And there's so many applications of AI that we haven't even been aware of up until this point, and machine learning. So yeah, very interested in this topic. I would say probably obsessed with it.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
my interest, I have several different interests, of course, but I have this fascination with the intake process and creating this client journey, right? So I've been actually thinking for months about how can AI tools help improve the intake process, right? And so I think I've come upon the best application of AI to the intake process that I can think of.
Okay.
And for about 7 years, or ever since Productive Therapist has been around, people have been asking us this one question: will you answer my phone live? And we actually, in the early days, we tried it. We said, okay, well, yes, we can. Not all the time, but we will answer your phone live. And it was a spectacular failure because it just didn't work. So if you imagine we've got one shared virtual assistant that's like, let's say they're working with 3 practices, right?
Oh,
and
man.
they get on the phone with one potential client, and then all of a sudden their phone is
Bing,
buzz.
bing. Yeah, right.
No, it's way stressful. That only works with a call center with multiple, lots of people and like this efficient routing system, all that kind of stuff. But people want their phone answered live. I think that's true to this day. There's a lot of folks that would rather text or use an app or email for sure. But still, live phone answer seems to be like, the goal. For all these years, we've said no. We've partnered with virtual reception companies and sent folks to them, and et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, the technology is here now to where you can have your phone answered within 20 to 30 seconds by a very competent conversational AI agent that can answer questions, that knows everything about your practice, that can answer basic questions, even, what insurances you take, what are your fees, you name it, whatever you want that conversational agent to answer. But here's the powerful thing in my mind, because I still think the human component is important. And fingers crossed, it will be for some time, both for people wanting human therapists and also for a human intake coordinator being a valuable thing, right?
Yeah.
So the most amazing thing about this AI solution is that the AI agent picks up the phone, has this conversation that's actually very helpful to the person on the phone. And then it has the capability of seeing the calendar of the intake coordinator and conversationally booking an appointment. Right. And it's not that amazing in terms of all the things that AI can do in the world right now. This is not the most amazing thing, but I think it's a game changer. So if somebody could call my practice right now, even when my intake coordinator is busy, right, and they can get the information that they need and then book a call, like that's amazing to me.
Yeah, that's very good. I mean, it basically like 1980s. That's your secretary, right? I mean, it's
It is.
very
Yeah.
effective. What are some of the concerns that you think therapists or practice owners have around the use of a tool like that? And how do you think they get solved for?
Yeah. It seems like the biggest concerns around AI for therapists are in the note taking and the scribe, AI scribe sort of realm, the biggest sort of controversy, if you will, or like problems with it. I think this application that I'm talking about, I don't think most therapists or practice owners would have an issue with it. Hopefully they will be excited about it. But yeah, there's a lot of existential concerns and challenges. It's just with all of this. And I've been watching a lot of videos and studying all that. I spent about probably like 80% of my AI learning time on cool tools and how to use them, and then like 20% on like end of the world doomsday or like projection stuff, and yeah, or like moral ethical sort of issues around it. It's all fascinating, but I don't think
go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't think most therapists would have an issue with an AI bot either being a chatbot or a conversational AI agent. I think that would be a win.
I don't imagine that's a big concern either. The one concern I have, you tell me what you think about this. Right now, it's like a free for all, right? You run out there, you put your flag in the ground, and it's yours to claim, right? And that's all well and good until somebody tries to use it for nefarious reasons, which people have like a really innate gift to do with almost anything, right? And then it's going to get legislated back. And so right now, we're seeing like your state, California, Colorado, New York, limiting what insurance companies are allowed to do with AI in like the billing world. But there's still no regulation on what the providers can do, practices, right? So practices can still like whatever their imagination can dream up, they can do, which I think makes a lot of sense. Like what you're talking about. So are you developing that kind of thing, that kind of technology?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been using it for a little while with Productive Therapist, and it's really
going?
great. I was good. I'll talk about that. But I just on the topic of insurance and intake, right? I was looking, I'll send this link to you if you want to put in the show notes, just interesting. But I was looking at this company that a friend shared with me, and they have AI, I think it's mostly chatbots, but they can, and you've probably heard of this, but they can actually check your insurance benefits and do a whole bunch of insurance related tasks. I don't know exactly how that works, but that's interesting because that's an important component of the intake process for an insurance-based practice. And if some of that can be automated and done without a human and done well, I think that's promising.
No, it is promising for sure. The problem is insurance companies aren't allowed to do it back. And so you flood the insurance company with essentially unlimited amounts of calls, right? And then you can't get the information fast enough. So there is still a limiting factor in this process. And that's where I think the regulation and the legislation needs to loosen a little for the insurance companies, because two machines should be able to have that conversation without a doubt.
It's just data. We're just trying to acquire data, right?
Data, right? And so that makes a ton of sense. So we're kind of like in this weird like tension space. Like practices are allowed to use maximizing tools at a scale that's unheard of, but insurance companies aren't really allowed to reciprocate. But we'll get there eventually. I think that's how policy decisions get made, right? Like you overswing and then you got to swing back, and you kind of like find where the middle is for sure.
Yeah, I hope that happens too. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it'll be really, really great.
One mistake in your notes can cost you a reimbursement. Blueprint helps providers avoid that by writing smarter documentation, flagging issues early, and getting claims out the door faster. Check the show notes for the link to give it a try for free.
So for a practice owner considering bringing on a virtual assistant or using an AI tool, what should they look for? Like, what are the pitfalls? How should they approach this? How have you approached this conversation in your own practice?
Yeah. So in my experience, when you're thinking about a virtual assistant specifically for intake coordinator function, right? I think it's ideal to, if you're solo or you're just starting a group or you've got a small to medium-sized group, there's a lot of options there. But I think a virtual assistant like the ones that Productive Therapist provides are ideal for either the very busy solo practice or the practice with maybe 5 to 15 clinicians. I think it's an amazing solution because you essentially get to pay just for the minutes that you use, right? And at least with us and other companies like ours, you get a fully trained, HIPAA certified virtual assistant who is good at handling that entire process from that first inquiry to that first session and even beyond that. So I think it's an incredibly good solution because it's, at the end of the day, it's actually a lot cheaper than hiring a part-time person or hiring a full-time person for that matter. And then in our experience, once folks get to a certain size, they want to hire in-house, and that makes sense. So we provide training for that. We've done recruiting in the past. We're basically just trying to help equip as many practices as possible to have an awesome intake process. And then I think you really do want somebody who has, obviously you want somebody that has admin experience, but you want somebody that has an understanding of the value of therapy and believes in sort of what they're selling, so to speak, right? And then you want somebody that has the personality characteristics that are most ideal. They don't have to have a psychology degree. In my opinion, they don't even have to be a therapist. They have to be a warm, compassionate person that can skillfully guide a conversation to the outcome that you want, right? So I think those are the things to look for, whether you're hiring in-house or you're hiring a virtual assistant.
For sure. Have you read Good to Great by Jim Collins?
I read it a number of years ago. I would like to revisit that book, though.
Yeah, it's a great book, but the concept that they talk about in the companies that were great, the first who, then what, is exactly what you're talking about, right? You can't hire just anybody to work in your practice. Like, what if they don't fit your culture, and what if they don't know where the intricacies of a practice are? Like, one of the reasons why we've never touched the intake space, this fascinates me to no end, Uriah. Like, therapists or practice, like providers, clinicians in any specialty will go, this is my schedule. And then you learn very quickly, they go, well, unless they're this kind of patient, right? And then you're like, I don't know what the intricacies are, right? Like, how do I know when you're willing to break your schedule rules around that? How do you handle those kinds of like flexible thoughts from a clinician's perspective?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. That's one of the pain points of our team that they
Oh, yeah.
experience, especially with the larger practices that have multiple clinicians. Number one, just making sure the clinician's availability is correct so that the scheduling process can run, efficiently and work efficiently. And then understanding the particular preferences of each clinician. It's not that hard of a problem to solve, but it's just a human one, whether it's updating availability or clearly communicating what you do want or don't want. So it's not that hard, but it's a definite pain point for sure. Yeah. And I mean, I've tried to delegate my email and my calendar several times over the years and failed because I'm such a control freak.
Yeah.
And I have so many preferences that, the way I want things done. So I understand. I'm not, I'm the same.
Right. Well, and it's tough because it's like, these are my working hours, except if I have an ideal client that's going to fudge a little north or south of my schedule, it makes sense to do that. Right. And I don't think there's a clinician, I don't know, maybe there are clinicians like this. They're so rigid in their schedule that they're willing to pass on a client or a patient that's a good fit. So maybe that exists in like a hospital system or something, but I don't know if in the private practice space, anybody's really that rigid. Is that a best practice you would say that practices need to implement, is rigidity in that sense? Or are there ways around?
I mean, you have to have structure and you have to have boundaries around because in order to design any kind of business operation or workflow, you just need those things. And for the person in the intake role, it could be really frustrating if there's not a decent amount of predictability and consistency. So yeah,
for sure.
And in my experience, it often just comes down to, well, it's an interpersonal relationship issue, but it comes down to coaching. If it's a group practice. And I was talking to a group practice owner from Iowa yesterday, and she was talking about, accountability and wanting things to happen a certain way. I was like, that's just a human conversation. It's a human application of accountability. There's no way around that, really. You can use some technology and whatnot, but at the end of the day, it's like, hey, Jeremy, we need to talk. This is the way things need to go, and this is the way they're going. How do we get you from here to here, right?
Well, that's right. And then you're going to take a risk, right? You see that with like your plumber, right? Your plumbing example, whoever you called could have been a total lemon, right?
Right.
And then you're out the money and you got to just move on, right? At some point. So yeah, it makes sense for sure. So for a practice owner who's really overwhelmed by the idea of overhauling their current system, like let's say their current intake process is a total disaster and they're getting complaints and clinicians are mad and their intake person's in their office and all this stuff. What's like where would you recommend they start? Oftentimes starting is the hardest. Where does a practice owner like that start to begin the process of renovating their intake process?
Yeah, if your intake process is not working, you probably know what the major issues are, the major pain points. So you want to attack that. But some of my best advice that I like to give to anyone is to secret shop your own intake process. Because unless unless you're brand new, you haven't gone through it. You haven't seen it from the client's perspective in a long time, or maybe not ever. So go through, and it depends on if you're solo or group, of course, but go through and look at absolutely everything from, your outgoing voicemail message all the way to the login experience of the client portal. So you can do this. You can just create yourself, add yourself to the EHR as a client and then go through everything. Or you could, if you wanted to be a little bit nefarious, you could, call your own practice and be a client, pretend to be a client, or have a friend do it. Right. I think that's helpful because
Whoa.
you will absolutely find things that you could improve. And I think you know this, but for a little while this year, I've been doing intake audits, right? Where I actually do that myself. I secret shop your intake process
That's
and
wild.
tell
So
you
fun.
what's awesome and what could be better. It actually is pretty fun. The one little, I don't know if this is valuable to share. Hopefully it is, but I like those small little like 1 to 2% improvements that make a difference, like the little things. So every email that you send out to a client, whether it's automatic or it's templated, just go look at it and put it into ChatGPT or Claude and say, can you make this friendlier? Can you make this better? Just to like personalize every aspect of the intake process. So that's just a little bit of a takeaway there.
Yeah, no, I
But
appreciate that for sure.
yeah,
As a small rabbit trail, you're into ChatGPT and Claude. Are those like your two LLMs that you're really into these days?
I am mostly using Claude because I found that it's even better for business applications right now. But I do still use both for sure for different things. ChatGPT is currently, as we're talking right now, still way better at creating images. And I use it for a number of different things. Sometimes I use one to feed information to the other one. So
Oh,
yeah, I've gone deep, Jeremy. I'm way in the deep end of all these things,
well,
but
this is why you're the head nerd, man. I mean,
that's
this
right.
is like,
I gotta keep that title.
that's right. Yeah, you got to earn that title, man. But what do you, can you give me an example of like taking one to feed the other?
Yeah, so I will have ChatGPT create prompts that I feed into Claude. I mean, sometimes, well, not to get too into the weeds about this, but sometimes I will give Claude a prompt that takes a little while, whether it's pulling data from my email or my Google Drive or my Google Calendar or coding something or whatever the application might be. And so while Claude is working, I'll go over to ChatGPT and talk to it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just
That's
really
great.
trying to leverage both tools as much as possible. I'll
Yeah.
tell you one little hack. This is a
Mhm.
ChatGPT thing that people can use if they want. So you can use the voice chat feature in ChatGPT to do role plays for your intake coordinator. And all you have to do, you can do it on the phone, you can do it on the free plan. You just hit that voice button and then you say, I need to do a role play. I'm the intake coordinator here for XYZ practice. And can you play the role of, for example, a mother calling for therapy for her teenage daughter who has anxiety? And then you could even input information about we take these insurances or we don't take these insurances, et cetera. And then ChatGPT will have a back and forth intake call with you. And then at the end, you can say, hey, rate my performance. How did I do? What could I do better to increase the likelihood of this person becoming a client? So
That's
that is a
brilliant.
really fun and practical hack.
Oh, that's brilliant. Do you think it works with like really clinical populations, or does it mainly work with like people that are seeking treatment from like just a standard set of diagnoses?
Oh no, it would work with any context that you give it.
Wow.
So like, I mean, that's the amazing thing about AI is that you just tell it who it is. You just give it a role and you give it a function. And then in some ways, you can give it a bunch of context and a bunch of knowledge, and then it will do whatever you want it to do. Yeah. The applications are just limitless. And that's sometimes the overwhelm of like, okay, well, I can do so many things. What are the useful things? That's what I'm trying to hone in on is like, what is actually helpful to practice owners on a day-to-day basis for the intake process, for business strategy, for financial analysis, et cetera. I mean, yeah, creating videos of cats,
Yeah,
AI cat videos or whatever. Like, yeah, lots of people want to do that, but I
that's
want to
awesome.
figure out how this is going to actually make my day better, smoother, more streamlined, help my practice so that I can hang out with my kids and do fun things in my life.
Yeah, and the exciting thing, Uriah, about all these tools is that a lot of current clinicians grew up without it. And so the tool is only as good as the thinker, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
you think about a
Mm-hmm.
prompt, unless you know how to ask a question or ask a prompt in a way that gets you what you want, you won't get what you want. You'll actually just
Right.
get a very general bad answer. But if you can use the training that you have and formulate a well crafted critical thinking prompt, you'll get a very good answer, or you'll get a
It's
very
so
good
true.
tool or a picture or a video. It's only as good as that. And so my long range 30,000 foot view prediction is that as people become more dependent on these tools, actually the quality of the output is going to go down because you won't know how
Interesting.
to bring in other disciplines or other thoughts into the prompt, right? So, because like somebody like you actually wrote papers in college, like you did that, right?
And on a typewriter in high school.
Maybe if you're like Tom Hanks or something on the typewriter, but like you as a creative
Right.
person and an early adopter, you seemed like you just jump right in, yeah, to these tools and try to figure out how they help.
A lot of times I do. I feel like I was a little bit late with the AI thing, but
Hmm.
I'm fully on board now. So sometimes I don't jump on trends or like, whatever everyone is doing, but if it's fun or interesting or I can find an application for it, yeah, I'm in for sure. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, give us like a prediction, 5 to 10 years down the road. Where do you see patient intake heading?
So many people are trying to like prognosticate into the future of like what's
Nice.
going to happen with AI and just the world in general. And the most honest answers that I've been hearing lately are nobody knows. So as much
Amazing.
as I would love to tell you 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
this is exactly what's going to happen. I mean, absolutely the combination of smart humans with AI tools, those folks are going to accomplish the most. Whether that's a therapist using AI for their marketing and maybe an AI note taker, et cetera, to just help more people and be more efficient and get their practice, the brand awareness of their practice out there. So I think the combination of humans and AI tools is going to like revolutionize a lot of different things. But fundamentally, so much of what we do is human. And so hopefully those things don't change very much. Yes, our clients will be using these AI tools for support, for life coaching, for therapy. Yes, people are now using it for therapy. So that is happening. And I mean, hopefully our lives get better and we can better address the mental health crises of our country. Because I think, honestly, if from a standpoint of accessibility, if people in rural areas or just more people who would be unlikely to be able to want to see a therapist in person or afford to see a therapist or even have insurance, if more and more people can get quality support that is delivered by artificial intelligence. I know this is somewhat controversial, but I think that's a huge, huge win. And yes, the use case, the situations where it's has negative outcomes. Yeah, we do need regulation to help with that. So I don't know if that's helpful, but those are a couple thoughts.
No, that's super helpful. You're right. I
Yeah,
think that makes sense. I think a lot of people are scared
yeah.
about what's going to happen with AI. Is it going to take my job? Am I going to be able to do something? The way that we've started to think and talk about AI at our place is like this is the wrench, right? This is the car, right? It's like a new innovation of technology. And the people that win are the ones that can think through how to use it the best, right? That's a weird way to say that. Sort of like your sparring partner idea, right?
Hmm.
You can use it to spar your intake process. That's only as good as the person you're like the person sparring with the thing, right?
Sure.
Right. So if the person who's engaging in the sparring activity, right, to use that language, can think through the right like tempo, I think those people are going to do okay because you're going to be able to
Definitely.
use it for whatever you want to use it for, which is pretty
Yeah.
exciting. Our listeners want to think through how to do this better, like patient registration, patient intake. If somebody listening doesn't want to deal with it and they just want to outsource it to you, where do they go? How do they get in touch? What does that look like?
All of our amazing resources are housed over at productivetherapist.com. And yes, we do have a team of virtual assistants that can step into your practice and help you run your intake process much more efficiently. And we also have training. If you have your own person, we can train them for you. And then we also have some other courses and resources. It's all focused on the intake process. So that's, if you're looking for help with that, that's the place to go.
Yeah, shout out to the directory too. The directory is very good.
Yeah.
If you've not been
Thanks.
on the productive therapist directory, it's very good. So
I
yeah,
will I will
definitely
plug
good.
that too because we can't help everybody, obviously. And I've found over the years a number of really good mental health virtual assistant companies. So you can check those out at productivetherapistdirectory.com.
Yeah, amazing. The goal of this podcast is to give providers and their staff clear systems and best practices for revenue cycle management specifically. But when we interview people like you that are changing the game and changing the landscape of private practice, we love to get as much wisdom out of you as we can muster. And I love the way our last question is phrased, but if you erased everything that you had to say about this topic, about patient intake, and only could leave one piece of advice around patient intake, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I actually do fortunately have an answer that comes to mind.
Nice.
And it might not be what you or others would expect, but my one piece of advice would be aim for surprise and delight. So as you're designing your intake process or redesigning your intake process, think about how you can make it wonderful. How can you make it shockingly amazing? I know that sounds almost silly, but if you look at this through that lens, I think you will create a more helpful, a more wonderful sort of experience for your new clients. Because I think they deserve that. You know, we all deserve that, especially when we are hurting and in crisis and looking for help. How can you make it more caring, more compassionate, more surprisingly wonderful?
That's awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here on the podcast and talking with us today. If you enjoyed today's episode of The Claim Game, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps new listeners to find us. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to The Claim Game on your favorite podcast app. Your feedback means so much to us. We want to provide valuable education about revenue cycle management. So if there's something we didn't cover in our topic that was a burning question for you, please let us know so we can try to get you the information you desire. You can find the links to all resources we mentioned in this episode in the show notes. And if you want to dive deeper into our resources, we have two places you can do that. First, you can go to our blog at practicesol.com/blog, where we have 8 years of educational blogs. If you want to learn more about what Practice Solutions does, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Just go to practicesol.com to learn more and to connect with one of our awesome people on our team. Thanks for listening. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and this is The Claim Game. See you at the game table next time.